So good morning. I'm Patricia Doxey. I'm a reporter with the Daily Freeman newspaper, and we're here today with Lisa Cutten and March Gallagher, the two candidates for the Ulster County Comptroller's position. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We'll be chatting for about an hour. Yvonne Lahara, our senior editor, will be manning the technological end of things. Um, and we'll be talking a bit about who you are, why you're running, and how you envision the office of the county comptroller. I'd like to give you both a few minutes to just offer an opening statement. And Lisa, you are on my right, so you get to go first this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to be here. My name is Lisa Cutten. I'm running for Ulster County Comptroller. This is the kind of work that I've been doing for much of my career. I've been in public accounting for almost 40 years. The comptroller's job is to watch the money. The reason we have a comptroller in Ulster County is in the wake of the jail debacle, when we were 3 years late and $30 million over budget, there was nobody to hold accountable. That's when we put in the elected executive and elected comptroller. The comptroller is the chief auditing officer. As a certified public accountant, I've been doing auditing for many years and have more than 35 years experience in auditing and local government finance. I was appointed as the treasurer in the city of Kingston in 1986, served multiple terms there, went on to serve as the comptroller in the town of Poughkeepsie and in the town of Fishkill, and in 2006 was appointed as the auditor for Ulster County. That was after the charter was adopted, but before it was implemented. First 2 weeks on the job, I knew what I was looking for, or what I should be doing as the county auditor. An invoice came across my desk for $50,000, and I couldn't understand what we were being asked to pay for. Started asking questions. I was ignored, ridiculed, job was threatened, etc. Kept standing for that, and issued a report along with the district attorney and the county attorney and a forensic auditor, made a presentation to the county legislature. That was referred to the New York State Attorney General to investigate. They investigated and prosecuted it. And the Supreme Court decision says that between 2002 and 2006, the not-for-profit organization Lower Sopus River Watch was paid more than $1.7 million. And during that time, they were successful in stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars of our taxpayer money. Had I not questioned that invoice and said I wasn't approving it, that never would have been stopped, and those folks would have continued stealing our money. I left county government, and then in 2011 was appointed by Elliot Auerbach, our only county comptroller, prior to Adele Ryder's interim appointment, as the senior auditor in the comptroller's office, where I helped implement some of the charter provisions. And Mike Hine tapped me to be the deputy budget director for the county. That was a promotion and an opportunity for me to see the county operations from a different perspective. In that role, I was the on-the-ground implementer of the county's financial management system. And in 2014, on April Fool's Day, we went live with the new system, which was a complete success, implementing new accountability measures with that. In May of 2014, I was appointed as the Director of Accountability, Compliance, and Efficiency, a division of the Finance Department, and served in that capacity for 5 years. I have lots of experience in accounting and auditing, and I have more than 10 years experience in Ulster County government. The point is that I can do the job. I have the background, the expertise to do the job, and that I will do the job. I will keep standing for taxpayers despite pushback. And I have this experience. It is in contrast. My opponent will talk about her experience, but I do believe that there's a hope that people will not understand the differences between the two of us. And I would appreciate this opportunity to talk about the position of comptroller, which is supposed to be independent, not involved in politics, looking out for the taxpayers' money, making sure we're getting what we're paying for, that it's not being wasted or stolen, etc.
Okay, Thank you very much. Marge?
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the Daily Freeman taking the time so that voters can learn more about this office and both of our qualifications and, to go into the voting season with an informed opinion about this. My name is Marge Gallagher, and I'm running for Ulster County Comptroller as well. I have been interested in this position since before it was created. My background is that I'm an attorney. I have 2 master's degrees, and I have a career history of always working on the financial side of public policy issues. I was a budget analyst with the Ways and Means Committee in the New York State Assembly immediately coming out of college. And after finishing my graduate work, went to Harvard School of Public Health to look at Superfund expenditures nationally and whether or not they were in line with human health risks. But really, my interest in county accountability and transparency grew out of my small business legal practice. I moved home to raise my family. I am from Ulster County. I went to Onteora High School, and I decided to move back home to be closer to my parents in 2000. And I hung a shingle and started a small business practice. And I had a client come into my office with plans for the Ulster County Jail. He rolled them out with tears in his eyes and was lamenting that there were beams going through the elevator shafts of the building. He was a concrete contractor and said, I know there are going to be just hundreds of change orders on this project going into it. I'm gravely concerned that it's going to be a big boondoggle. He was right. I connected him to the only legislator I knew at the time, which actually was Rich Parity. The project was already sort of going along its way, but it made me realize that Ulster County government was in sore need of reform. I worked with other women in the county to form Ulster County Democratic Women and to change the makeup of the legislature, which had not been in Democratic hands in many, many years. We were able to really transition that leadership. This is pre-county executive form of government, and also begin explaining to people who live in Ulster County why our budget was the way that it was, how little of it really is flexible for change. So much of that budget, 70% of our budget really is mandated. But also the Democratic leadership there was left with a very large 28% tax increase that was left over from the prior administration, the prior legislative leadership. I began working with UCDW, Ulster County Democratic Women, to really explain in graphical form what is the Ulster County budget? Why do we have this large tax increase? Once the legislature was transitioned, I was actually appointed to serve on the Industrial Development Agency Board in 2006, and I became the chair of that board. For people who don't know, who are listening, that's the organization that gives tax breaks to provide incentives for development. And what I found there is that we did not have good oversight or transparency of that process. We were not monitoring the projects that were receiving tax breaks, and tax breaks under payment in lieu of tax agreements, pilot agreements, were not tied to the quality of the project. We brought in a wave of reform there. This predates what is now known as the Public Authorities Accountability Act. So this is pre-adoption of that state law, to really make sure that we had the ability to claw back tax benefits if people were not performing as they were required. As a part of that responsibility, I worked with other leaders at the community college, the Chamber of Commerce, the planning department, to put together a new strategic economic development plan for Ulster County called Ulster Tomorrow. It was ultimately adopted as part of the county's comprehensive plan. And I chaired a committee during that process that was about restructuring economic development. Incidentally, Mike Hine, who was then the county administrator, served on that committee. And once he was elected, he invited me to come in-house and actually do the restructuring. And I spent 5 years inside Ulster County government restructuring at the economic development, basically agencies and departments, sunsetting and terminating agencies that we thought were ineffective, like Ulster County Development Corporation, et cetera. Once that restructuring was done, I knew that my work was done. I'm not somebody who sells property. I'm really more of a strategic thinker. And I went to Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress, where I spent several years doing research on infrastructure finance and how actually the aging in the Hudson Valley is going to impact our our healthcare system and our economy. And most recently, I was president and CEO of the Community Foundations of the Hudson Valley. For any listener that hasn't looked at that, I urge you to look at it. It's a great, great organization that brings multiple donors, both living and legacy, together to really make an impact in the community. It's now between a $75 and $80 million charitable fund, and we were making between $3 and $18 million in annual grants, depending on the size of, particular needs that year. In that role, I oversaw a staff of 8 people, 7 people, 8, including myself, including CPA financial staff. And really, we made some significant changes there as well on the internal controls and other things while I was at that location. But I have to say, over the last year, and this really speaks to my run here for County Comptroller, I have come to the conclusion that we need more good people in government. We need more women leaders. I'm thrilled that no matter what happens in this race, we are going to have a woman controller, and I think that's terrific for the people of Ulster County. So I have decided to return to public service, and when Elliot Auerbach announced that he was stepping down, I knew that this was the position for me. I'm really excited to bring my government, nonprofit, and for-profit experience. We need a fresh look at things inside Ulster County.
March, I'm going to start with you with a question that you don't have a background in accounting. You said you were an attorney. You have 2 master's degrees. What makes you qualified to be the comptroller?
Well, I've taken accounting classes both at the undergraduate and graduate level. But if you look at the charter, it doesn't require a CPA to be the controller. And actually, the state controller is not an accountant. I have the endorsement of both the state controller and the outgoing controller for Ulster County. I think one of the reasons this is an elected position is because we want to make sure that we have somebody here who can translate complicated financial information to the public, to the legislature and executive, and who understands how fiscal information will impact policymaking. So that is a skill set that I definitely have. And right now, incidentally, we do not have a single CPA in that office. And I can tell you under my leadership, that will not be the case. There do need to be certified public accountants there. I have worked with other staff that contain CPAs, and I will have no problem managing that work. But I think it's important to have a broader vision and to be able to see how the nuts and bolts and bean counting, if you will, is going to impact broader policy.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to, I wanted to be clear. There is no requirement to be a CPA, but you've got, my standard line is 350 million, and with the executive's budget, I guess it's going to be 363 million-ish dollars to oversee. And to think that with a small staff of 6 people, that a person should not have any background in accounting or auditing is a little bit short-sighted and naive, in my view.
Okay. Linda, you've come under some criticism.
Lisa.
I'm sorry, Lisa. I apologize.
No worries.
I wrote that too early this morning. Lisa, you've come under some criticism for taking on the GOP line after failing to get the Democratic line. The county comptroller's office is one that should adhere to a strict code of ethics and be non-political. How does sort of that square with your decision to I don't want to say jump ship, but leave your Democratic Party and take the Republican conservative and I think the independence lines?
Correct. There's some place for everybody to vote for me.
Didn't have a convention like the Democrats did.
Yeah. So this is the situation. The previous controller made his announcement that he was leaving Ulster County government in a fashion that prevented there being a primary, which meant there was no public conversation about the controller's job. There was no public conversation about the qualifications of the candidates, that a very small number of people within the Democratic Party, which is roughly 46,000 voters, less than 300 at best, and by some counts, about 100 people made the decision on who the candidate was going to be. I had been approached by the Independence Party before the caucus and had not made a decision about that. Post-caucus and post being relieved of my position by the newly elected county executive, indicating that he felt the county should go in a different direction, away from accountability, away from compliance, and away from efficiency. That was disturbing. And in reviewing the events that had occurred over the 2 months, I had to reconsider my position. And I put my hat in the ring to run for the position because I'm qualified to do the job. This is what I've been doing my career, and I have a proven record in stopping fraud and standing up for the taxpayers for more than 30 years. That's why I was running to begin with. And in light of events, it seemed really undemocratic for less than 100 or less than 300 of the 115,000 voters in Ulster County to decide who the next comptroller was going to be. There having been no public conversation about the job, about qualifications, etc. I felt it was my obligation to be a candidate and to have this opportunity for voters to be educated and to make an informed decision about a really important office. This is the check and balance. There have been a lot of people that have talked about concerns that the executive has a lot of power, and the comptroller has the ability to be a check and balance on that. And, my view, it is critically important that you have people that are rock solid in accounting and auditing. As you well know, the county legislature during this time of having a county comptroller has annually hired an independent budget consultant to look at the executive's budget, now has a CPA on the legislative staff and another highly qualified financial person. And if we had a comptroller's office that was rock solid in accounting and auditing, would we have to spend these resources on other full-time positions and consultants? Would we have to, some would say, waste the taxpayer money on doing something that the comptroller's office should be able to do? This is why I'm running.
I'd like to respond to that
Yes.
if I have a moment.
Thank you.
So, yes, unfortunately, the resignation of Elliot Auerbach came at a time that we could not have a primary, but there was a very public process. I think, these committee structures, these committee members actually carry petitions and they can be challenged, and there can be elections at the local level to elect committee people. So committee people represent the voters in that district. And so they really are chosen by a democratic process. The second point is that there was a public conversation. My opponent and I both attended, well more than a dozen separate town meetings to talk to the public and committee people at the local level about our qualifications. And then the convention itself was very well attended. I don't know the exact number of people who voted, but I do know there were over 300 people in the room. I believe the Daily Freeman was there. There was press in the room. It was well noticed. It was a public meeting. So I do feel that there was a public process. And I want to just also note that, although let me back up to say, I welcome the challenge and I'm excited about the election. And this has been a great opportunity, I think, through the campaign to get the word out about my vision for the office. So I don't mind having to go through a further process. I also want to note that the chair of the Independence Party was the owner of a business that failed to meet their obligations under their pilot agreement. They received tax breaks for development. They promised jobs that they did not create. Now, I tried to terminate that pilot agreement. I was not successful, but I was successful in shining a light and in implementing new policies to make sure that never happens again. It is no surprise to me that my nemesis in that tax policy world would offer an endorsement to a candidate opposing me. I am not surprised.
Would you like to respond to that?
Yes. As I may have mentioned, I'm a certified public accountant, and I have done auditing in this community for many years, including the Ulster County Development Corporation and the IDA over the years. And I can tell you that there are many of the businesses who received incentives and credits and pilot agreements were not properly monitored and did not comply with their promises. And it is unfortunate. And some would say that we're, still. I think the county executive would say that we're still fighting an economic development challenge. And so these economic development activities that my opponent was involved in seem to have been ineffective overall in producing the kinds of results for the people of this county that we would have hoped.
May I respond?
Yep, very quickly. Last response.
I will. Okay, fine. We've had tremendous private sector job growth in Ulster County in the last 10 years. And, the numbers do not lie on that point.
About the office, there has been a lot of controversy surrounding the office of the Comptroller since almost the inception of that office. What do you each of you say you see the position as sort of the watchdog of the county's money? Mm-hmm. What specifically would you do differently than the former Comptroller Elliot Auerbach did in terms of audits, programmatic or financial? What do you see you doing differently, and where would you start? And who went first? I think you go first this time.
Okay, great. Yes. I know the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to look at the risk assessment tool. That is the underlying metric that the Comptroller's office uses to select what agencies and departments and programs it's going to audit each year. Elliot Auerbach developed one in-house. I need to take a second look at that. It is not directly in alignment with what the Office of State Comptroller recommends, and I would definitely want to review that and make sure that risk assessment tool is something that I feel comfortable with going forward. So I can tell you right now that would be one of the first things that I will do. I also recognize that we have, a good, strong staff there, although understaffed. We have several vacancies right now. That staff has ideas about things they want to look at, and I would be working with them to figure that out. I really blame both sides, of both the Comptroller's office and the executive's office, for the souring of that relationship. And I think I recall, because I was in the executive's office from the very beginning of the new administration, there was a situation where the county executive asked the Comptroller's office to audit a safe of checks that were backdated, some as many as 5 years, in the Department of Health. And for whatever reason, the Comptroller's office declined to take that assignment. I would not do that. I will definitely be looking to work with the executive and the legislature to learn what they want to see focused on by the Comptroller's office. And if there's something that needs to be farmed out to law enforcement, then so be it. But I am not going to shy away from those tough questions. And I do believe that really, at the very beginning of the new form of the charter government, soured the relations between those two offices. So, the relationship between the executive and the Comptroller does not have to be that way. I had a recent conversation with Mark Molinaro, the Dutchess County, Republican Dutchess County executive. How is it to work with Robin Lois, the fairly new Democratic Comptroller? And he said, it's been great. And if you look at the management comments back on some of her reports, you can see that her reports are being taken in a very productive way and turned into, internal control changes in the agencies and departments. And there does not have to be an adversarial relationship. It doesn't mean there's always going to be an agreement between Pat Ryan and I, or whoever the executive is. But, and I will be maintaining my independence, but it does not have to be adversarial. There may be issues that are adversarial that you have strong differences on, but the entire relationship does not need to be that way.
And Lisa, before, I just do want to follow up on something here, because you will be of the same party. How can the residents of Ulster County be assured that you aren't going to favor the executive branch or the administration, or not look as closly at things because you're out and about with him now, you're going to fundraisers with him, you're in the same party as him. How can people be comfortable knowing that there won't be some considerations given to him because he is the same?
We are running on the same ticket, but I have not endorsed the county executive, and I'm not seeking his endorsement in my race. And I would also just note that, we have a state comptroller and a state governor who are of the same party, and no one would say they are directly aligned on things. And I think the relationship between the previous county executive and the previous county comptroller show that, there definitely can be, an adversarial relationship there. I think that the voters right now are going to have to make a decision on the personal integrity of the people vying for the position. And I hope that my leadership and work history shows that I am able to be independent and that I will be a strong check and balance to the county executive, regardless of the party that he is in. I have a long history of bipartisanship, and I think people on both sides of the aisle know I work for the taxpayer. That is my interest, and that is what is driving my interest here. And frankly, if people are not satisfied in 2 years, this is a shortened term, there will be a change. So it is really going to be up to the taxpayer and the voter to make that decision. You can have, good oversight that is of the same party. Party names in this case are somewhat irrelevant.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, Lisa, if we can go back to the original question, and then I have a follow-up for you as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to also, jump off with Robin Lois. So Robin Lois is a CPA. Her predecessor was an attorney. And there doesn't seem to be any disagreement about the quality of the work coming out of that office at this time and the value. And that's the point. The point is that as a CPA, number one, you understand quality control. You have to have internal systems to review the work of the entire staff before you're issuing reports. Make sure it's solid, that it's based on the books and records. You have to have internal review processes, and those individuals have to understand what the underlying work is supposed to be in order to provide that. As a CPA, I can do that. I can be that leader for the staff that review the work and the work product. The other issue that I want to point to is the independence. It is critical that the controller be independent, politically independent. I have a license. I'm required by that license to be independent. And, one of the things that was somewhat alluded to and was certainly brought up yesterday in a presentation that we did to the SOPA seniors, that my opponent has been in the business of giving money, giving tax breaks away to corporations, negotiating pilots, that sort of thing, and also giving money through her previous job at the Community Foundation to many of the not-for-profits that Ulster County contracts with. One of the things, the jobs for the controller is to audit programs and contracts that the county is administering. And those contracts currently with Ulster County are in excess of $20 million. And with a staff of 6 people, you can't audit everything. And how are we to know what my opponent would be choosing not to audit because of her relationship giving money away to those very organizations? It's something which, in my view, aside from the politics side of it and the questions that come up in terms of being independent and looking at the executive, but more importantly, it's not like sitting on a board where you can recuse yourself from a particular vote because you might have a conflict of interest. We won't know what she's not looking at or why. And independence is in appearance and in fact. That's in terms of my professional obligation. That's my professional obligation, in appearance and in fact. And to me, it's a very big concern for the taxpayers of this county.
I'm not certain that you answered my question, though, which is sort of where do you see yourself starting?
So we have, I'll start there. So social services is more than a third of the county budget. If you look at the new presentation from the county executive for for the 2020 budget. That spending is increasing. The revenue's increasing somewhat, but not in a corresponding way. We have some not-for-profits. I'll take Family of Woodstock, who provides an extraordinary amount of service to Ulster County for many of its programs and multiple departments of the county. The Comptroller has never audited those contracts and that relationship. And really, Ulster County and Ulster County residents are heavily dependent on that organization. And we have an obligation to understand, are we getting the results? And, like some of the situations in Dutchess County where the Comptroller looked at a program and the conclusion was, yes, it was a beneficial program, but you have to look at these things. You have to understand the books and records. I have, in my public accounting days, worked on preparing financial statements for not-for-profit organizations and been an auditor. So I know both sides and really can get in there and look at it in a meaningful way, and the books and records, and to see whether we're getting what we're paying for the citizens of this county.
March, do you have a?
I do. I'd love to talk about independence, because actually, if you look at government accounting standards, and we have a couple of significant tomes that govern this, including the Yellow Book from 2018. There's a situation where circumstances can create a familiarity threat, and where senior engagement personnel have a long association with the audited entity. That is considered a conflict of interest. Not having worked outside in a different kind of relationship, that is not necessarily a conflict of interest. As a grant maker, I was entering into grant agreements that are essentially contracts that require services, just like Ulster County does in their fee-for-service contracts. Government accounting standards say that you can have a self-review threat, and that is where an auditor has, in the past, worked inside as management responsibilities. Now, my opponent here said, that she implemented the financial system, brought the new system live, and implemented accountability measures, and was inside Ulster County government for 10 years. I would say that right there is a management participation threat, and that we need fresh eyes. She is not going to be able to review her own work. And that is exactly what is called for in the Comptroller's office.
Yeah.
Lisa?
So there's been a great deal of misunderstanding about the role of the division that I ran, which was accountability, compliance, and efficiency. And I was not involved in management decisions. My division really was a consulting arm in implementing measures to take advantage of the accountability opportunities with the financial software as part of a process, reviewing contracts, looking at compliance, helping departments with their efficiencies. There were no management decisions. We're not involved in the transactions, etc. This is, and unfortunately, the previous Comptroller often got entangled in spars with the county executive. And, as you may recall, I was required by the county executive and the legislative leadership at the time to look at the body of the Comptroller's work in forming the budget process, and had the opportunity to review 100% of the available reports that the Comptroller had issued. And as you alluded to, Pat, kind of out of the gate started with a bumpy relationship where the Comptroller decided to look at attendance of the legislators, which, was questionable in terms of a decision of what to look at. But then when he got the math wrong, really kind of set the tone for the tenure of his of the relationship, where over and over and over again reports were issued that were not factually correct. Having knowledge about the books and records is critical to being able to do the job well. And people have talked about a personality conflict. That was rooted, in my view, rooted in a work product that could not be relied upon because it was factually incorrect. So it was a problem for the legislature and it was a problem for the executive. And having worked inside the administration, I can tell you there's, it can be nice for the administration, for the executive to have an ineffective controller because there really isn't anything that's
But
going to
you're
be
not
said.
saying that it's a prerequisite to having this job, right? Because I mean, you can look at the Dutchess County Comptroller,
Right.
who has not worked within county government. Both of you say that she has been an effective, thus far an effective comptroller. So you're not saying that should be a requirement or a prerequisite for her.
Right, but having knowledge of books and records, having worked in accounting, and I can tell you, I went to school. I have a 4-year degree in accounting. We had 1 2-credit course in auditing. I can tell you that the literally thousands of days that I've spent as an auditor have given me much more value than that 2-credit course. So, college gives you a good starting point and a framework, but in this realm, the on-the-job training is what really matters. And the same thing for governmental. And my opponent talked about time in the as a budget analyst for the state. I interviewed with the state after I had local government experience, and when I uttered the words balanced budget, my interview was over because at a local level, we are required to have a balanced budget. At the state level, no such requirement. You're doing economic incentives and all those kinds of things. That's not what we do at a local level. So no, it's not required to have the county experience with the books and records. It's helpful, but to have a background in accounting and auditing.
Because we don't want to go past noon, give a closing statement. I started with Lisa. I'll let you go first this time.
Okay,
March. Thank
terrific.
you.
Thanks, Pat. So I think, it's time to have a fresh pair of eyes in the controller's office. And we're going to have a different person there no matter what. But I come with perspective of the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and government sector. I have not been implementing internal controls inside the executive staff for the last few years. And I will bring an independent approach to examining the work that is going on, both from the internal control side and also the audit side. In my experience as a funder over the last few years, I've been working with some of the outside agencies that the county contracts with now for services under grant agreements that have requirements similar to county contracts. And I believe that the best savings for taxpayers is to look at the program audit side. Are we getting the most we can for our money? And are we doing things as efficiently as we possibly can? I think that the broader perspective on the value that this office can bring in translating complicated financial information for the executive and legislature, as well as this multifaceted experience that I have, is why I've been endorsed by the current state controller, Tom DiNapoli, and the CSEA union that represents 900 employees for the county. I am excited about the race. I've had a great time meeting people all throughout the county, and I can tell you the number one issue on people's minds is affordability. People want to be able to afford to live in Ulster County. That means that taxpayer money needs to be managed wisely. I'm a fiscal conservative, and that's the approach that I'm going to take to my responsibilities in the controller's office. I hope that I, have helped inform the conversation today, and I look forward to the early voting in November. Don't forget, we have early voting this year, starting the 26th.
October, right. Thank you. And Lisa.
Yeah, so I'm committed to watching out for the taxpayers. That's what I've been doing for a very long time. I have not been in an auditing role in Ulster County government since 2011, more than 8 years. So I look forward to being in that role. There are a lot of things that I would like to look at. I have a proven track record of stopping fraud, identifying it and following it and standing up, even though there will be pressure and pushback. Knowing what you're talking about in that regard is critical to being able to withstand the kind of pressure political pressure that will come. And in terms of internal controls, you have to know internal controls to be able to implement them. My vision for the office is that the taxpayers will be able to trust their government, trust that they have an advocate inside the government who's independent, who can do the job and will do the job for them. I believe that my opponent is relying on people not realizing that she has no days in her career as an auditor. I have thousands of days as an auditor. People need to notice, or it's going to be in the best interest of people to notice the difference between having experience, having qualifications, being independent, and being able to do the job for the people. That's what I have to offer, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you and to answer these questions, and look forward to support and vote.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Pat and Yvonne. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for giving us the time today.